Continue assistindo em The Nature of Things, Ciência e Natureza, Elos Naturais.
Evidence of life that is 2 billion years old lies in these rocks on the shores of Lake Superior. These were boulders that stood in the shallow waters of an ancient lake and became covered with layers of bacteria. A thin, transparent section from this fossil deposit discloses life as it then was. Already well over 1 billion years old, it is still a microcosm, a world of microbes.
You're in a micro world. You're in a micro world in which predation, that is the really vicious capture of one organism by another, is going on, in which sex lives so bizarre you can't imagine, where organisms are coming together and passing all sorts of genes without fusing their bodies, or other organisms that are fusing their bodies back to front in all sorts of bizarre postures that you can't imagine. It's all going on, but it's all going in drops of water that are within a few millimeters of the surface.
Loose strands of DNA lie in the center of these modern microbes known as cyanobacteria. Their direct ancestors, 2 billion years ago, by swapping and rearranging of genes, came up with a complex molecule that would change the face of the planet. It was chlorophyll. When exposed to light, it instantly generates a flow of electrons, energy directly from the sun to power the chemistry of life. As a byproduct of this process of photosynthesis, oxygen, essential to modern life, was first released into the atmosphere. At the time, it was a deadly toxin, a nearly catastrophic challenge to life. The microbes, separately, had developed a number of survival skills. In more than 1 billion years of genetic experiments in these minute laboratories, some organisms, like the cyanobacteria, could process sunlight. A few could tolerate oxygen. And one had developed a thin tube-like protein that enabled it to move. These separate skills came together in one larger cell. The mobile microbe may have been eaten, but the tubular protein inside it remained undigested. Perhaps oxygen-breathing microbes attacked the cell, but found instead a safe place for reproduction and contributed oxygen tolerance to the host. And the chlorophyll-containing cyanobacteria contributed energy from the sun. In this new composite cell, the tightly packed nucleus of DNA is on the right. Inhabiting the same cell are the black sausage-like oxygen-breathing mitochondria, once separate living microbes. And the larger shapes contain chlorophyll. The dark areas to the left and right are threads of tubular protein, remnants of the invading mobile bacteria that now arrange and separate the chromosomes in cell division. These once competing microbes form the modern oxygen-breathing cell, powered by evolution by cooperation.
So what was a dreadful aggression with time becomes an unholy alliance, and with even more time becomes a confederation that works for all of the members better together than when separate. And I think that's the basic idea. It's not cooperation versus competition. It's not death versus life. It's the usual conciliation, reconciliation, struggle, aggressiveness, conciliation that we're all very familiar with, that leads to an emergent entity with properties better than, more adaptive than the single units.
While the many independent microbes, like the cyanobacteria of today, continued their separate existence in the oceans, the new composite cells combined in a host of new and intricate designs. On the way to becoming plants, they used the energy of the sun to build more and more complex structures.
Which are successful? The cyanobacteria that are outside in nature, or the ones that have been internalized and gotten into the large trees and the bushes and so on, and you see that consortia pays off. That in fact the ones that get spread to the high alpine regions and to the tropical forests are the cyanobacteria that are trapped inside the leaves of the plants rather than the ones that have tried to make it on their own.
The light processing microbes have become in time an integral part of these delicate platforms reaching to the sun, spreading out and greening the planet. The animal cell, unlike the plant cell, does not contain chlorophyll and can't process sunlight. But in compensation, it developed a separate skill. By making use of calcium extracted from the water, it learned to build hard protective structures, a chemistry that would lead to the bony skeleton of animals. Electron micrographs show these intricate coats of armor once built by single-celled organisms. The modern animal skeleton is made by the same 500-million-year-old chemistry. Built around a jointed skeleton, animals are mobile and able to exploit the sun's energy stored in the plants.
What's so fascinating is that if you take a cell of a rhinoceros or a fish or a person or a chicken, the cell component's so similar you could hand your friends electron micrographs from all those animals and not see any difference at all. And in fact, you're looking at the way those cells are packaged that make the differences.
A common chemistry, a common history, means a deep and underlying unity in nature's diversity. Every stage of evolution exists within us and around us. A few cells in a single package. Single cells beginning to act in unison in a mold called labyrinthula. Microbes digesting wood in the gut of a termite, each dependent on the other, and ultimately on the trees reaching to the sun.
Whenever you have an ecosystem full of animals, deer and a forest of trees, the microbes have not been replaced. They've just been augmented. The microbes are still there in the soil. They're on the surface of the trees. They're in the deer just as they're in our own bodies. And so what you have to do is sort of close your eyes and get rid of the large animal for a moment and see this microbial shadow that makes an outline around him, inside him, and so on. We think of ourselves as individuals, but in fact, we are walking ecosystems. We're essentially walking microbial communities.
Nature has made many uses of the little tubular protein that became part of our composite cells 2 billion years ago. It drives the sperm to its target in the womb. As cell whips or cilia, it confers mobility on many small organisms.
The richest source of microtubules, it turns out, besides sperm tails and cilia and cell whips in general, is the brain, nervous tissue. When the nerve cells evolved, they evolved from a microtubule substructure that was already there in the microcosm.
Through the human brain, itself a product of evolution, we are able to look back, to see the pathways by which we have come, to imagine, and begin to piece together the stages in our cosmic journey. Leon Lederman.
Given the characters, the objects, and given an understanding of the structure of the forces, the rules by which you put these objects together, you can build up the entire universe as we know it. First the subnuclear particles, then the protons and neutrons, then the nuclei, then the atoms, the molecules, the genes, the people, and so on, all the way up, the galaxies and the stars.
The silent atoms from the immensity of space have come together to kindle the spark of life on planet Earth. We come into the world carrying within us the history of the universe. Like all living things, we're embraced by a nature that is whole and indivisible.